Okay, today we're graphing circles. Two things we're going to be looking at. Students will be graphing circles given an equation, and you'll also be given the equation, and from that equation you're going to give me the circle. All right, so those are the two things we're going to be working on today. Now, before we can do either one of those, there's a couple of things that we got to get straight first. First thing up at the top of your paper, it says the equation for a circle that has a center at HK. In other words, if this center of the circle over here was HK, and it had a radius of R. Of course, when I say radius, we're talking the distance from the center of our circle to the circle itself. That equation would be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. This is the equation we're going to be using today. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. And that's if I have the center at HK and a radius of r. Alright, so let's see how this works. We're given three circles here. And from those three circles, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find its center, and we're also going to find its radius. And once we have those two things, we'll see if we can come up with an equation. Alright, so if we take a look at number one, the first thing I need to know is what is the center of that circle? What's the ordered pair?
1, negative 2.
1, negative 2. So write that down. 1, negative 2 is the center of that circle. How about the radius? What would the radius of this circle be? What's the distance from the center to the circle? 3. The radius is 3. We'll write the equation in a minute. Right now all we're doing is looking at the center and the radius. How about for number 2? What would the center for number 2 be? Negative 2, 1. And the radius for that circle would be 4. There you go. How about the last one over there? What's the center of that last one? 0, 0. And the radius of that big circle is 6. Alright, so at this point all we've done is find the center and the radius. Once we have those two things, it's very easy to come up with the equation. And the equation we said we were going to be working was with x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So here's how it's going to work. On the first one, we're going to write the equation. That equation is going to be x minus 1. I want to point out, notice how the sign is opposite of what I have over here. Instead of positive 1, I'm using a negative 1. I'm going to do the same thing in the next parenthesis. It's going to be y plus 2 squared. So notice how the signs are different. Equals. Look what it says over here. It says it's r squared. In other words, whatever the radius is, we're going to square that number. So we said the radius was 3. So what do you get when you square 3? 9. So it's going to equal to a 9. Therefore, the equation of that circle is x minus 1 squared plus y plus 2 squared is equal to a 9. That's it. That's the equation. Let's try the same thing on number 2 here. This one has a center at negative 2, 1. So the equation here is going to be x plus 2 squared. Notice how I changed the sign there. Plus y minus 1 squared. Again, notice how I changed the sign. And what is it going to equal to? 16. Where's that 16 coming from? We're just learning the radius.
On the first one, the x plus 2, you change it because the 2 is already negative.
Right. If it's negative, we put a positive in. If it's positive, we put a negative. It's always going to be opposite. That's what this negative h and negative k tells us. We're using the opposites. All right, the last one a little different here. This time we have a center at 0, 0. So what do you think the equation is going to be here? What am I going to start with?
0.
What's the equation? X plus x minus
Minus x squared.
Actually, 0 is just 0. It's not positive nor negative. Now, since it's 0, 0, we don't even need to bother putting a plus or minus. What we're going to do instead is just write this as x squared plus y squared is equal to something. And I can do that because it's a 0, 0 for the center. What is it going to equal to? 36. That's what we get from square root of 6. 6 squared is 36. All right, so the equation for number 3, all it is x squared plus y squared is equal to a 36. All right, so we were given these circles, and from those circles we came up with the equations. Let's go a little backwards now. Number 4, they give me the equation, and from that equation I'm going to graph the circle. But before I can do that, first thing I know is what is the center of this circle? Well, look at the equation. We should be able to tell what the center is simply by looking at the equation. Anybody want to take a guess what that center is?
3 negative 2.
3 negative 2. All we're doing is looking at these two numbers and changing their sign. All right, the other thing I need is a radius. The radius. It's not 25, but it is a 5. And where did that 5 come from? Square root of 25. That's where the 5 came from. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use these two things in order to graph our circle. So let's go ahead and plot the center. We said it was at 3 negative 2, so go ahead and find 3 negative 2 and plot that point. That's the center of our circle. We also just found out that the radius of this circle is going to be 5. So what they want us to do is move 5 units above, 5 units below, 5 units to the left, and 5 units to the right of the center. So let's go ahead and do that. 5 units above, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's right here. 5 units below, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's this one right here. 5 units to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 5 units to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got my center, and I've got 4 other points. Now, we're going to go ahead and identify those 4 points that we just plotted. So this one over here, above. What is this order here right here? Above the center? 3, 3. So write that one down, 3, 3. And by the way, it doesn't matter what order we write them in as long as you've got them all listed. What about the one below the center? This one down at the bottom. What's that order there? 3 negative 7. What about this one to the right of our center? That one out to the right. What is it? 8 negative 2. And this other one that we have over here to the left, that order pair is negative 2, negative 2. So these are the 4 order pairs that we've plotted. At this point, we're going to go ahead and sketch the graph. All we're going to do is come over here, connect the dots, and make our circle. So this circle represents the equation x minus 3 squared plus y plus 2 squared is equal to a 25. So again, when it comes to circles, 2 important things are the center and the radius. If we know those 2 things, we can come up with an equation, and it's correct. All right, over on the next page, number 5. For each of the circles in the picture below, they want us to tell what the center and the radius are, and then write the equation for each of those circles. Now, they've already given us example C there, so we're going to start with D. We're going to look at this circle right here. So the first thing I need to know is what is the center of that circle? What is the center of circle D? Negative 3, 3. Write that down for me right down here at the bottom. What about the radius of that circle? What's the radius of that circle? 2. So we know the center is at negative 3, 3, and we know the radius is 2. Now that we know that, let's come up with the equation. So here it is. We're going to have x plus 3 squared. It's the opposite of the x value. Plus y minus 3 squared. Again, it's the opposite of our y value. And what is it going to equal to? 4. All we're going to do is take this radius and square it. So the equation for D is x plus 3 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 4. That's the equation for that particular circle. Now let's take a look at circle E. This one right here. Let's find the same two things. The center. What's the center of that circle? Center of circle E. Negative 5, negative 2. What's the radius of that circle? 3. Now that we know those two things, let's write the equation. And that equation is going to be x plus 5 squared plus y plus 2 squared is equal to a what? 9. Again, notice how I'm changing the signs. The center was negative 5, negative 2, but when I wrote my equation, I used a positive 5 and a positive 2. Don't forget about changing your sign. Now let's look at circle F. That's this little one over here. First thing I need to know is, what is the center? All right, so Alexander, what's the center of F? 6, 4. Samantha, what's the radius of that circle? 1. Now that we know these two things, we're going to write the equation. So here it is. It's going to be x minus 6 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to a, what is 1 squared? 1. So the equation we end up with is x minus 6 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to a 1. All right, we got one more circle here. Let's take a look at this last one, G. That's the big one. First thing I need to do is find the center. So Caleb, what do you think? What's the center there? 4, negative 1. All right, Matthew, what do you think the radius is? 4. Radius. Now that we know those two things, let's write the equation, and that equation is going to be x minus 4 squared plus y plus 1 squared, and all of that's going to equal to a 16. Got to square the 4. 4 squared is 16. All right, so these are the equations for each of these circles. What do you think? Not too bad? Can handle it? All right, we got one last thing to look at down at the bottom. This is about as tricky as they're going to get. Number 6. Now for number 6, they've given me a circle, and they've given me 2 points on this circle. They tell me that what we have here is the diameter of the circle. It goes through the endpoints negative 7, negative 2, and 3, 4. Notice they did not tell me what the center of the circle is. That's what I need to find. It's somewhere in here. What I want to know is where exactly is that point. So the way we're going to find that center is using the midpoint formula. And midpoint formula, for those of you that don't have it memorized, is x1 plus x2 divided by 2. In other words, add up your x's and divide them by 2. And then do the same thing with your y's. y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Again, all we're doing is adding the y's and dividing them by 2. So let's see what we get. Let's start with the x's. If I add the two x's, negative 7 plus 3. What's the negative 7 plus 3? Negative 4. But we still got to divide that by 2. But what's the negative 4 divided by 2? Negative 2. So we're halfway there. We know what the x value is in our center. Now let's go over to the y's. We're going to add the two y's. We need to add negative 2 plus 4. What's a negative 2 plus 4? 2. But we need to divide that by 2. So 2 divided by 2 would give us a 1. Therefore, what we're saying is the center of this circle should be at negative 2, 1. Does that look about right? If you look at the graph over here, does that look close to negative 2, 1? All right, so it looks like we're in pretty good shape here. So now all we got to do is figure out what the radius is. I want to know what is the distance from our center here to the edge of the circle. What is that distance? Well, we don't know what that distance is. So what we're going to have to do is use the distance formula. So we're going to use the distance formula to find the distance from the center, which we've already said was at negative 2, 1, to this point 3, 4. All right, so what is the formula for the distance? Here it is. And this is on your formula chart. It's not like it's something you have to memorize. It's d equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So this is the formula we're going to use to find the distance from the center to that point 3, 4. All right, so let's replace all those variables with the actual values. So x, the two x's that I'm looking at are negative 2 and positive 3. So we're going to have negative 2 minus a positive 3. That goes in the first set of parentheses. I'm looking at the x's. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the y. The y the two y's we have are 1 and 4. Those are the ones that I'm going to subtract. 1 minus 4. So what I need you guys to do is go to your calculators, and I want you to do everything that's underneath the bracket, everything that's underneath the square root. So in your calculator, you're going to put parentheses, negative 2 minus 3 squared plus 1 minus 4 squared. What do we get? 34. So the distance from the center to that point 3, 4 is the square root of 34. Now I could take this one step further and actually take the square root of 34. And what would we get? Put that in your calculator. What is the square root of 34? 5.8309, and so on and so on. So I've got the option of using the decimal or the distance, the square root of 34. For our purposes, we're going to use the square root of 34 because it's more accurate. When you start using decimals and start rounding those decimals, then we're only looking at an approximation. So we're actually going to use that d equals the square root of 34 because it's precise, it's exact. All right, so now that I know my center, I know my radius, let's write the equation. Here we go. Remember, the equation is, write it down, okay. Here's what we're looking at. All I'm going to do is replace the h, the k, and the r with some numbers here. All right, so h, we're going to replace that with what? It's going to be in what in parentheses? X minus 2 or x plus 2? Plus 2. Remember, it's always the opposite. What's going to go in the other parentheses? Y minus 1 and y plus 1. Y minus 1. And now for the radius. Whatever the radius is, we need to square it. And we've already said that the radius was the square root of 34. So what do you get when you square the square root of 34? Put it in your calculator if you don't know. What is the square root of 34 squared? It's 34. Basically, the square root and the square just cancel each other out. Therefore, the equation of this circle that we were given is this right here. X plus 2 squared plus y minus 1 squared is equal to a 34. That's our equation. All right, what I want you to do is turn to the next page, and you're going to try some on your own now. Number 7, you've got A, B, C, D, and E, and F. For each of those equations, you're going to graph me the circles, all on that big graph paper there. So you should have 6 circles when it's all said and done. For number 8, they give you the equation. What you're going to do for me is find the radius and give me 4 points based on that radius. So you're only doing 7 and 8 for me. When you get done, you're going to turn it in. All right, let's get started.